If you've been through a breakup, at some point you should ask yourself, should I get back together with my ex or should I simply move on? Now, there's rarely an easy answer to this question, and so it can, rattle around in your head for months as you agonize over the right choice, debating the pros and cons again and again. But you've actually been thinking about this in the wrong way. And I'm going to tell you how to make this decision so that you get exactly what you want without any of the negative consequences. And that way, you can be confident that you have made the right choice and you won't regret the path that you've taken. Now, of course, there is no one-size-fits-all answer here, but there are good reasons and bad reasons to move on from your ex. And this is going to take some self-reflection on your part to determine how all of these reasons apply to your particular situation. Because sometimes they're valid, and at other times, they're just excuses to avoid doing what's right. You really need to be brutally honest with yourself as we cover the possible reasons to move on. So number one is that you're simply afraid to try again. And fear really is a big factor when it comes to how we deal with others in relationships. It can make us hold back our feelings, bury our concerns, and push people away. And fear pretty much always comes into play when it comes to getting back together with an ex. I've heard it many times. I want to try again with my ex, but I'm just so scared. They're afraid that their partner won't be the same person that they once were. They're afraid that they'll be rejected and end up getting hurt again, or that they won't be able to recapture the magic that they once had. And I almost always tell these people that if they really still love this other person, then they need to fight their fears and give it another shot. Because really, fear is never a good reason to give up on love. If you choose to stay away for this reason, you're almost always going to regret it. The fear will fade, but the feelings won't. You'll always be left wondering, what if I was able to face my fears and try again? Would my life be different, better than it is today? Now, I'm not going to say that your reasons for being afraid aren't valid. It may not work out. You may be rejected, you may be disappointed, and you may end up right back where you are now. But in the long run, it will be worth it because you'll no longer have that nagging worry that you made the wrong choice. Now, of course, you also have to look at why you're afraid, because if your fear is caused by the next item on this list, then you may actually want to let it go and move on. And that is, number two, you can't trust them. So, whether you've been cheated on, lied to, or just, failed to really build trust together, this is a solid reason to stay away and move on with your life. Because trust is the foundation of love. And if you can't trust this person, you're not going to be able to build a life together, no matter how much you want to. You can try, but you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. You'll doubt their words and actions. You won't ever be able to relax and let them in. So you won't be able to truly connect. For example, say you were cheated on. Your partner was on a work trip and they slept with one of their coworkers. You get back together after a while and everything seems perfect. But what happens when they have to go on another work trip? Or when they get a new coworker who seems just a little bit too friendly? Now, whether or not they deserve it, you're going to start building resentment towards them, which is going to drive a giant wedge into your relationship and obviously create major issues. That being said, there are situations where trust can be rebuilt. You just need to be honest with yourself. Is this one of those situations, or are you just in denial? I think you probably already know the answer. And this is actually something that I expanded on my recent video about what your ex is hiding from you. And I'll link to that video in the description and in the box here in the corner. But let's move on to number three, which is there are people telling you not to. Now, this one is a little more complicated than the others because it's going to depend on what these people are saying to you about the relationship. I'm never going to be the person to tell you that your friends are just jealous and that you need to ditch them and run away with your ex no matter what they say. But there are situations where people will point you in the wrong direction when it comes to your relationships. So obviously, first off, you can disregard pretty much anybody who doesn't really know you or the relationship. So your friends at work who never met your ex and know nothing about you or the relationship, obviously don't take their advice all that seriously. These are the people who just give generic advice like, they're your ex for a reason or leave the past in the past. They're just repeating things that they've heard other people say rather than actually analyzing the situation. And then there are those people who have an ulterior motive. This might be a member of your family who wants to meddle in your relationship, or that so-called friend of yours who's been waiting for a chance to ask you out. So before you let them influence your decision, consider what their motives are because they might not really have your best interests at heart. The people you probably do want to listen to are your real friends, the people closest to you who really know the lay of the land. These people have heard you talk about your relationship, the good and the bad. They've been here through the breakup, and they know this person and how they treated you. And if these people are telling you to stay away, then oftentimes you do want to take them seriously because they have no reason to lie to you. In fact, it can actually be really hard to speak up and tell a friend something like this. So, they've probably been holding their tongue for a while now. And number 4 is you're simply too proud. It's easy to make decisions based on how they make us look. And many people may avoid getting back with their ex because they think it makes them look weak, indecisive, stuck in the past, whatever. And adding to this is any drama that's out there for people to gossip about. Oh, did you hear that she got back with him even though they had that huge fight? Or, I can't believe he took her back after she treated him that way. The thing you have to remember is how quickly these things come and go. I'm sure you know couples who've had drama, broken up, and gotten back together. At first, maybe it's scandalous, but after a few months, it's a distant memory, and you're not going to judge them for it. So the bottom line is that most people don't really care. They just love to gossip. Life is messy. It's so easy to pick apart the decisions of others from the outside, but you're the one who has to actually live your life. So you need to do what's right for you. And another place your pride can hurt you is how you look at the relationship with your ex. You might fear admitting that you care about them and want them back. I actually see this all the time. It's almost like people see themselves in competition with their ex. They don't want to be the one to break first and ask to see the other person. They fear that's going to make them look weak and spineless. But the really weak move is just letting their pride stand in the way of their own happiness. While you need to think about how your ex will perceive you early on in the process of reconnecting, you can't let that decide whether or not you actually try again. It's not worth being the supposedly stronger person if it means you end up missing out on a relationship that could be perfect for you. And number 5, you don't see a future together. Now, one of the main causes of a permanent breakup is the future. So maybe things could be good or even great if you reconnected. But there are things about your future together that you just can't reconcile. And that they're going to create huge issues down the line. That could include something like one of you desperately wants kids and the other is totally against the idea. One of you wants to live a nomadic lifestyle, moving from city to city, and the other person wants to put down roots and stay in their hometown. One of you wants to grind to start a business, and the other wants to live a simple life without much ambition. And while, the two of you may be able to get along now, as time goes on, these are going to become fundamental incompatibilities that will prevent you from creating a life together. Now, of course, compromise is vital, but when there's no possible middle ground, then one of you is going to have to make a much bigger sacrifice. And that is going to be a path to resentment and unhappiness. And again, this has to be a judgment call. So look at all these issues head on and ask yourself, is this something that we can work out, or is this going to keep on being a major issue as long as we're together? So for example, I had a client who had a sleep disorder, so she needed a separate bed. Her partner, who was then ex, couldn't accept this distance, and it actually ended up breaking them up. And this seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but after spending time apart, they realized that they really just needed to work it out. And they ended up finding a solution that involved a lot of pre-bed cuddle time, 2 beds in the same room, and a little couples counseling to address some of the other issues around intimacy. And I'm happy to say that they were able to get back together and actually ended up getting married. So for many couples, something like this might be truly impossible to solve. But for others, it's a stutter step. It all depends on you as individuals and the relationship that you've been able to build. And number 6, too much time has passed. Now, I used to say that if it's been a year or more, then you should probably pack it in and just accept that it's over and just move on. But I have been running into more and more couples who have reconnected after long periods apart, and I've changed my stance a little bit on this. Sometimes you break up because of circumstances that are outside your control. Sometimes you break up because of compatibility issues. But as time goes on, people and circumstances change, and these issues can end up solving themselves, and this can make getting back together really an attractive option. But the thing about time is that you can't always predict how it's going to change people. What I'm saying is, if you're still hung up on your ex that you broke up with 10 years ago, you need to know that the person you're pining after no longer really exists. You may not even recognize them if you saw them on the street. And not just physically, but emotionally too. Their values, their sense of humor, their personality, everything is going to be quite different. So maybe the two of you would get along even better now than you did back then, but you really can't know until you actually try. And until then, you're really just living in a fantasy world. So here's my advice when it comes to reconnecting with your ex after a long period of time. Your best bet is to treat it like they're an entirely different person, because oftentimes they are. So feel things out slowly, get to know them again, and then see if it has the potential to go anywhere. But don't make any big assumptions about who they are and how they feel. And don't get too invested until you've actually reestablished regular contact. Because as far as you know, they could be married or in jail or both. So just slow your roll. And number 7, you scored less than 60 on my free quiz. So if you're wondering about your chances of getting your ex back, please check out breakupbrad.com/quiz. I've put together a free quiz tool that can tell you your chances of getting back together based on your unique answers. Like I said, it's free. It only takes 5 minutes. And it can really help you get a straight answer to this question. Now, I will say that if you score 55 to 60 or lower, then your chances of getting back together are quite slim, and it's going to be a very difficult road if you decide to go that way. But if you score, say 70 plus, then your chances are probably pretty good, and you will have a fair shot if you really want to make the attempt. Again, that's breakupbrad.com/quiz to try it out for yourself. But now on to number 8. You can't get over the past. So it's pretty common for people to hurt each other in relationships, especially leading up to a breakup. And while you can recover from this, seeing them all the time can make healing difficult or even impossible. You'll probably be totally fine 99% of the time, but it's that 1%, when you get a sudden memory of that cruel name they called you, or that giant fight when you thought you'd never stop crying, or that moment you walked in on them with somebody else. And these moments can come to define our memories of that other person, and that can sometimes be impossible to move past. And of course, the same applies to your ex. If you hurt them badly, they may not be able to look at you without seeing that pain. And this isn't only about ways you've wronged each other. Sometimes the relationship sours for reasons that are out of your control, and it can be almost impossible to recover from. After spending some time on your own, you'll be able to sort through these feelings and decide if you'll be able to see this other person in a romantic way again. It's going to take a while for the two of you to create enough memories together to basically wash away the bad ones. And sometimes that's just not going to be possible. And number 9, you only want to fix the mistakes you made. Now, this is something that I see pretty rarely, but it does happen, so I do want to talk about it quickly here. And what I'm referring to is the people who are less interested in actually getting back together with their ex because they love them, and they're more interested in doing it in order to undo the damage that they did. Now, these are generally people who are driven by image. They don't want to be the person who hurt somebody, a heartbreaker. And they also don't want to be a failure in relationships. Somebody who would give up and leave another person in the dust. And they don't want their ex to look down on them, and say negative things about them because of their behavior. And so they get back together just in order to keep up appearances, to make it all better so that they can feel better about themselves. And then, things settle down and they end up feeling unsatisfied because they don't actually want this person. They want the feeling of that getting back together, that getting back together actually provides them. And so they end up hurting them all over again. So, don't make this mistake. You can't fix your mistakes by making a new one. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully now you know if your reasons for moving on are valid or if you should reconsider getting back together with your ex. I do think it's fantastic that you're taking your time and really thinking about this decision before committing one way or another, because a lot of people don't. And the worst thing you can do is go forward in a direction without knowing why you're doing it. So if you decide to move on from the relationship without understanding your own motivations, you're going to go crazy, wondering if you made the right choice. You need to be fully committed one way or the other if you want to have a good outcome. And if you do decide to take the plunge, I would be happy to help you reconnect with your ex. Just go to breakupbrad.com/coaching to learn how my one-on-one coaching program works. Again, find out how you can work with me at breakupbrad.com/coaching. Whatever you decide, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, liking the video, and leaving your comments down below. I'm Brad Browning, and I will see you next time right here. Bye for now.